Hey everybody, welcome to another match in the Attigo, the Tier 8 Japanese Premium Cruiser. This one's going to be a bit of a demonstration on shell mechanics. Now the matchmakers managed to spit out a really bizarre game. Each team has one destroyer, we have two carriers, they have one, and everything else in the match is a cruiser. And most of the cruisers are of roughly equivalent combat capability. The Cleveland is ostensibly a tier 6, but the Cleveland really plays more like a tier 7. So, my opponents are mostly going to be other cruisers. Similarly to me, they aren't going to have a whole lot of armor, and they're going to rely more on mobility. This will be a very sort of fast-paced game because of the nature of the ships involved, and it should also be a good demonstration of shell mechanics because all the ships in this match have roughly equivalent weapons and armor, and will be in a lot of situations where different aspects of the shell behavior are shown off. One of the reasons that this is also a good demonstration is because for some reason, probably because I was half asleep when I was playing this match, I did not load AP at the start. In fact, I got most of the way through the match without even realizing I was firing HE. Somehow, don't ask me. And so you'll be able to see the massive difference in effect on target between an HE round and an AP round fired at the same kinds of ships from the same kinds of ranges and angles, just using the two different shell types. Now, one of our Cleveland says that the AP on his ship is not effective against tier 8+. Now, I asked him here if he had the 6-inch or 8-inch guns, and then I was going to tell him that the 8-inch guns are useful for plunging fire, but won't pen at close range. When I say that, I'm referring to battleships. At close range, 8-inch will pen any cruiser. 6-inch will probably pen most cruisers. In fact, really the only cruiser above tier 5 that has difficulty penning other cruisers that I can think of offhand is the Atlanta, because its guns are, of course, 5-inch dual-purpose guns from a destroyer. Like I said, a much faster paced game than usual. Because there are so many cruisers in this match, we've all just blazed straight down the channels on one side of the map, and we're already closing with the enemy. You can see our aircraft at work there. Cruisers are, of course, probably the hardest class of ships to operate against with aircraft, because not only can they dodge very well, they have excellent anti-aircraft armament. And one thing I should note is the cruiser's special anti-aircraft ability, which you can see I've equipped now on my Attigo, will actually panic aircraft, even if it's not effectively killing them. For instance, the Taiho on the other team has very high tier aircraft that have a lot of hit points. Even if it doesn't kill them, it will panic them, and it will cause them to spread their weapons a lot more. When torp bombers are within the area of effect of a cruiser with that ability activated, they will usually spread across about 90 degrees. Now you could actually see and hear some ricochets coming in there. That's from the enemy cruisers firing AP at me and not really having the right angle. Got some incoming bombers here. Unfortunately for me, while the first fails to fuse, I was not able to slow down in time to avoid the second, but only one hit, so that's not too bad, and of course I saw that one coming and was able to slow down in time. Like I said, I'm not shooting down many aircraft here because the Taiho is a high tier ship, but I am causing him to panic, and he certainly doesn't want to be hovering around over my head. And you can actually see our destroyer on this team is a Wakatake. Somebody's brought it into a match with tier 9s. That's fantastic. Not that it really matters, but it's just, I don't know why people do that. It's not really fun. A few missed shots in the Megami there. I'm still firing HE because I haven't noticed I'm using the wrong ammo. You also notice I'm shitting out torpedoes periodically at the enemy ships. Now, because they are cruisers and because this is a bit of a wild melee at the moment, I'm not expecting any hits, at least on the targets I'm aiming at. What I am kind of half expecting is somebody will carelessly drive into one, which is generally what happens in this kind of situation. But even if I'm not actively hitting people, I might force them to take evasive action, and that might affect their damage output. Of course, you still have to factor in the rotation of your turrets when you're in a cruiser. You don't want to mask your guns or traverse too quickly so that your turrets can't keep up. And that's one thing that I think people kind of overlook, is the amount of DPS you can force a ship to miss out on when you're forcing it to evade, especially with battleships. Battleships are probably the easiest to do it to because they have such a low rate of fire and they need to plan their moves so far ahead. With cruisers it's not so easy, and of course with destroyers, well, at least with the American destroyers, they can basically juke around and fire at the same time, they don't really care. But any ship where you really have slow rotating turrets or just a slow rudder shift, you can quite easily force them to forsake damage in favour of not getting killed. So here I'm engaging an Alba. He's supported by a Furitaka. These are both lower tier cruisers, and if there's anywhere I should definitely be using AP, this is it. And I will actually switch to AP in a moment after finally realising my mistake. Both of them are running more or less parallel to me, which gives me perfect shots. Their own fire, meanwhile, is directed at the cruiser to my left, who appears to have beached himself. Or, nope, I'm wrong, he hadn't beached himself, he was just near the shore. Set the Furitaka on fire. Unfortunately for that guy, he doesn't survive the weight of fire coming in on him, and his ship splits into bits. I use the island here to shield myself from the enemy Atago, who is a rather more serious threat than these two. And now you can see I've actually got AP loaded, and I'm starting to fire on the Furitaka. Now, I mentioned this before, but the Furitaka has a really stupid gun layout. It has 6 single gun turrets. This causes it to be a very long ship, and it has very long citadel areas as a result. And so the Furitaka, while it might have actually more hit points than the Alba behind him, he has no survivability whatsoever. If you hit a Furitaka almost anywhere, as long as you don't bounce, you're going to probably citadel hit it, or at least severely damage it. The PC's actually stopped there. I did still lead him with that shot, because I expected him to only stop momentarily. Usually puppies will stop a moment and then pick up speed again, and if you aim as if they're going to stay stopped, you will miss. These two are both approaching the blue line, so I have a pretty good idea that they're going to try and just use the blue line because they realise they're not going to win a fight with me any other way. It's not going to save them, however. Those torps look like a bit of a lost cause, so I shift my ship around to the left to unmask the torp tubes on the right side. This will give me a second spread to launch at the Alba while he's sliding along the blue line there, thinking he's pro. I launch one on his predicted path, which of course isn't accurate because he is on the blue line, but if he turns off of it he might go into those. If he stays on the blue line, that second spread, which is much closer to him, should hit. Now he's burning here. I have switched back to back to HE. I'm not sure why I did. I'm sure it made sense to me at the time, but you can see almost instantly I switched back to AP. I think it was because I was expecting him to actually turn off the blue line and give me shitty angles, but in fact he didn't. Well, he's not going to be able to now. He goes down. The Furitaka isn't really moving, even though he is on the blue line. So it's not difficult to predict his course and hit him.
Enemy cruiser sunk.
Now I think I mentioned this before, but the issue with the blue line is that it transfers your speed onto a completely different velocity vector, so it fucks up the game's lead calculation. You don't want to be aiming where the game's telling you to aim, or where you would traditionally think to aim. You want to be aiming for where they're actually going. If they're sliding sideways with the speed they would have, it's complicated. It's all velocity vector stuff because it takes one component of their movement and runs with that. and I can't explain things at the moment because my brain isn't working, but I think you get the point. It transfers their movement across the blue line, not the way that ship should normally go. TLDR, they can strafe along the blue line, and it fucks most people's aim up because the visual references you rely on to actually lead people obviously don't work when the ship is going fucking sideways. People do it deliberately as a way of trying to avoid damage with mixed results. It's kind of a shitty thing for them to do, and you can usually tell when they're going to try it because they'll just make a beeline for the edge of the map. If somebody's doing that and you're actually having a lot of trouble hitting them, the best thing to do is just fuck off outside their gun range and engage somebody else and just come back for them later. I don't know if Wargaming realised this is a problem. It's not a severe one, I'll openly admit. It doesn't happen hugely often, but it does happen. So maybe at some point they'll do something about it, maybe they won't. Until then, it's easy enough to avoid it. If somebody is on the blue line, you either wait for them to come off of it, or you just go somewhere else. Now, if you're paying attention there, you may have actually seen a ricochet. It looks like one of my 8-inch shells pinged off the front of the enemy Atago's turret. Then you can actually hear the shot feedback sound as well, to help people realise when their shots are ineffectively bouncing. Wargaming added very loud shot feedback, so no matter how far away the enemy ship is, you will hear a bounce or the sound of a hit. And you can see here, compared to my earlier shots with HE, just how much damage these AP hits do, particularly when I score a Citadel. And when you're fighting cruisers presenting their full broadside like this, at this kind of range, you will Citadel them. I'm not too worried about those aircraft at the moment. I do make a bit of a turn there just in case, but it seems they're going for somebody else, and so I don't have to worry about dodging them. Fire off some torps at the Cleveland, assuming he follows his current course, which he appears willing to do. He's completely preoccupied with somebody else, and this is the best time to fire torps at somebody, when they're obviously engaged with another ship and they don't even realise you're there. Because of course they're not going to turn until the torp warning comes on, and by then it's already too late. However, somebody else cleans them up, which leaves me to engage the Pensacola. Now there's virtually no chance of us winning this game. Our carrier is too far away to reset cap, the other one's sunk. We've got no cruisers in a position to reset. The enemy are going to win this one by cap no matter what we do. So at this stage I just try and get as much more damage in as I possibly can, so I can at least salvage some XP out of this. And here's another example of HE versus AP. I am not doing a whole lot of damage here. And you'll notice as soon as he opens fire, I didn't shoot torps there of course because the island is in the way, but as soon as this guy opens fire, he's shooting HE as well. I now switch to AP. So you still do decent damage with HE if the entire broadside hits. 5,500 damage is nothing to sneeze at, and I knocked out a bunch of his anti-aircraft guns. However, I now switch to AP and watch the difference. From the same range, roughly the same angle, in fact a slightly worse angle, it just completely fucked him.